All right, welcome. I'm Ryan Hoger with TEC. I also have with me Pete Wessel from Ecobee today. This is kind of a part 2 follow-up to the topic that we did a couple weeks ago. That one was kind of a basic overview that Pete ran through, talked about all the stuff the thermostat can do, some basic discussion of wiring and things like that. Today what we're going to do is we're going to pick up where that left off. So we're going to jump right into the wiring. And then what we're going to do is we're going to pull up a simulator on Pete's computer, and we're going to go through the setup of a thermostat. And I think we're going to probably do a gas system, and then we'll wipe it out and we'll do it again for like a heat pump type system. And then you guys will know what all the individual settings mean. So when you're tweaking stuff and adjusting it, you know exactly what you just changed and why. So let's do that. Can you hear me there, Pete? Are you good on your end?
I'm good. I can hear you loud and clear.
Awesome. All right. So you want me to do the wiring stuff here, or you want to do it?
I'll start out, Ryan, and then we'll kind of just go back and forth where it makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, good morning, everyone that's on. Really appreciate you guys joining, and like Ryan said, we had a really good turnout a couple weeks back, and we just didn't have enough time to sort of get into all the technical setup and wiring. So that's what the intention is this morning on this webinar. I'll kind of jump right into it. As always, I think if there's questions, put them in the chat box. Ryan and I will field those, and we'll just kind of go back and forth. So with with Ecobee, we always preach reliability, and mainly because we don't use an internal battery. So just going to explain how our thermostats need to be wiring depending on which type of equipment you're trying to control. So in general, you always have to have a common wire. We do give you an add-a-wire in the box with either of our residential models. So you're gonna always have it. You probably need it maybe 30–40% of the time, less than half of the time, because usually you're gonna have a common wire run to the thermostat. So with a conventional system, as long as you have that common wire, you've got the wiring configuration on the left here. So this is going to be a typical setup with the furnace and condensing unit. Nothing too special other than the power wire always is going to run into RC. So if you're just running heat, a lot of times that R wires run into RH at the old thermostat. When you take that old thermostat off the wall, put the Ecobee on, you always want to run that one R wire into RC. So if you only have one transformer, regardless whether you're running heat or cool, got to go into RC. If you don't have the RC and the common terminal powered at the thermostat, then it won't boot up. You won't get any power on the Ecobee. There's no jumper required, so you never want to put a jumper in between the two at the thermostat. You can use it on like a dual transformer setup. So on the right side here, like this is exactly what I have in my house. A lot of older homes, you got a boiler down in the basement, you get the air handler up in the attic. As long as the wiring is tied out all to one control, one zone, then typically you're going to be fine because you've got a fan wire, you've got the minimum required wires to make the Ecobee work. In the case you're just running heat on a boiler, so if I were to just kind of block out this left section here where the AC is, let's assume you've got a thermostat on the second floor for your air conditioning, and you've got a thermostat on the first floor that's run to the boiler downstairs. If you only have two wires running to the boiler, then you're going to have a problem. In that case, you would need a minimum of 3. So if you can pull an extra wire from the transformer down in the basement up to the thermostat, that'll work like a charm. If it's difficult to pull wiring, if it's just not something you want to try to do, there's a couple things we tell guys to do. You can get an aftermarket, like a common maker, company called FastStat that makes these where, it's just a little communicating module. Little pigtail goes back, tucked behind the wall, behind the thermostat, and then there's a transponder that's down by the transformer and by the boiler, by the equipment, which just communicates back and forth with the thermostat, and it gives you that third common wire that you would need. So that's one route you can take. I personally installed that in my house, and it took me 15 minutes. It was pretty easy. The other thing you can do, which we see more and more, is people don't necessarily care about having the thermostat in view, especially if it's like a commercial multi-residential setup. They may even prefer to not have the thermostat out in the main area, and they want to hide that away. And you can use our room sensors, and you can just wire the thermostat up direct right by the equipment, and you can turn the temperature read off at the thermostat and just use the sensors upstairs for temperature input. So that's another option you have, especially now, like with COVID-19, we're hearing more and more stories where people don't want to touch anything now. So so that's an interesting thing. You know, most people are on their phone 24/7, and they just control it from their phone anyways. So that's another solution potentially.
Hey, Pete.
Any comments, Ryan?
Yeah, I just want to add, not on the boiler thing, but on other topics where we've had people relocate the thermostat down near the furnace. If you're using the thermostat for either cooling or for a humidifier, that would be problematic because the humidity sensor stays in the thermostat as opposed to the little remote sensors. So in the boiler example, it works perfectly fine. But if you're going to do it with your AC and you relocate the stat into a crawl space or an attic, the humidity is going to be read there, and that's going to affect your dehumidification sequence. So be careful in those scenarios if you're trying to hide the stat. If you want to hide it just in general, like unrelated to the boiler topic, if you want to hide it in general, sticking it in a closet or something like that, you can do that. It's just got to be kind of in a semi-conditioned type space.
Yeah, it's a great point. Thanks, Ryan. Absolutely right. So I'll go on to the, well, it's a repeat. So like Ryan said, we'll run through a conventional setup, and we'll go through a heat pump as well. So with the heat pump, you've got your reversing valve, the OB terminal. Assuming you've got enough wires, then there's really nothing special here either. With the single transformer setup, again, R has to go into RC, but everything else is pretty straightforward. I'm not sure why I have two of each of those. So if you don't have,
it could be 3 and 1's for the Ecobee 4.
That's what it is. Yeah, I can't. So the little go to meeting or go to webinar thing blocks the right.
Oh yeah, I see. Yeah, it does block the little green bar up there.
Yeah, you guys don't see that though, right? You don't see the menu.
They don't. You and I do.
You and I only see it. Okay.
Yeah, you can hide it with that little orange arrow if you want to get it out of your way. You can do that.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, I just did that. Perfect. So the power center kit, if you don't have a common wire, like I said earlier, this is always in the box. So this will allow you to power up the Ecobee with just 4 wires running to the thermostat. Doesn't matter if it's the 3 light or the SmartThermostat Pro. The sub base is slightly different. On the SmartThermostat Pro, you've got a couple extra accessory terminals here, but same wiring configuration as far as the add a wire. So add a wire / PEK / power center kit. Power center kit is technically the term we use for this, and it's always going to be down by your equipment. So you know, ideally, most of the time it's going to be used on a conventional setup. You just go down to the furnace, open up the service door, find a spot for it. This little module has a magnetic base on it. So you stick that little module, you know, inside the furnace, and you'll pull out the 4 wires coming through the wall to the control board. So you just unhook those 4, and then you'll run the 5 off the power center kit into the board. So everything here is labeled nicely. And usually in a classroom setting, you know, we have hands-on installation boards, and we can kind of pass these things around and show you guys. But you'll notice every terminal has a color-coded label. So, you know, like your Y is little yellow pigtail with a Y on it. Your G is green with a G. So everything's nice and neatly labeled, and there's nothing different in the control board. So run these in, just like it shows, run the 4 coming through the wall right into this module, how it's displayed here. When you follow the 4 back through the wall to the thermostat, that's where you're gonna have a little bit of a different configuration. So your arm, you're still going to run into RC. The two wires you're going to change are going to be your fan. So your G wire will run into the common. So again, if you don't have RC and C inputs, then the thermostat won't turn on. So G, only when you're using this power extender kit, you'll run your fan into the common, and then you're going to use your first stage cool, your Y1, typically your yellow wire, it's going to run into the PEK terminal. So this little PEK terminal on the thermostat subbase would only be used if you're using this add a wire. Now there are some commercial updates we're pushing out in the software where maybe you would use that PEK terminal for some other multi-residential like fan coil setups. But in general, with residential, single family home, this is going to go in the furnace. Your Y goes into PEK and your G goes into C. Everything else at the subbase and the stat is going to be the same. And this just tells the thermostat that when that PEK terminal is in use, we're short a wire. We don't have a common wire, so it's going to maintain constant voltage depending on what's running. So it's just going to basically jump back and forth to maintain a constant power source.
We did
Any
have
questions?
We did have a question from Ishmael asking, what does PEK stand for?
So yeah, PEK is just short for Power Extender Kit. It's just the abbreviation for it. It's basically an add-a-wire, but we just use PEK. That's kind of our trademark term for it. Any others, Ryan?
Nope, but as you guys have questions, type them in and we'll read them out and try to get them all answered.
All right, Ryan, you want to cover humidifiers?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So some of these slides that we're using right now with you guys, they're ones that Pete and I have modified because we didn't necessarily like the ones that were in the book. So these two here for the humidifier are in that scenario. And when you're setting up the humidifier on the stat, which we'll show you as well, it doesn't give a really great description on what you need to pick. So there are two ways you can wire a humidifier to these stats. And we should clarify that only some of the stats have humidifier control. So Ecobee 3, Ecobee 4, and Ecobee Smart, which is the Ecobee 5, all can do a humidifier, but the Ecobee 3 Lite does not do a humidifier. That's part of it being light. So you can do a 2-wire or 1-wire scenario. The choice is not yours. The choice is by what kind of humidifier you purchased and installed. So in this case, the humidifier itself has a 24-volt transformer built into it. So therefore, we need to do the 2-wire configuration. This would also apply to other accessories. So if you had a dehumidifier or something like that you installed, this wiring scenario would also apply. So in this case, we have a 24-volt transformer inside the humidifier. So we need to run 2 wires from the humidifier over to the thermostat, and we'll terminate them on ACC plus and ACC minus. And then when we do the setup, we'll have to tell it we wired it that way. And then what it does, it just makes that those 2 terminals act as a dry contact. They have no power coming out of them from the thermostat side. They're just a dry contact. Thermostat closes the relay, and then that completes the circuit over there. If you go to the next slide, Pete, we have the 1-wire scenario. So the 1-wire scenario means that my humidifier does not have its own transformer. He needs power from somebody else. He's going to get that power from the furnace or the fan coil. So in that case, I only need 1 wire from the humidifier or dehumidifier, 1 wire from the humidifier over to ACC plus, and I do not use ACC minus. My second wire to complete the circuit, because you always need 2 wires for a circuit, would actually come from the common on the thermostat. But since the common on the thermostat already goes to the common on the furnace, we just pick it up there. That's why we call it 1 wire. There's still 2 wires involved. It's just that only 1 extra wire needs to go upstairs to the thermostat from the basement. So in this case, the humidifier wires to ACC plus on the thermostat. The other side of the humidifier goes to common on the fan coil or furnace board. And that common is already wired up to my thermostat, so I'm good there. I don't use the ACC minus terminal at all. It's not part of the function in this scenario. And instead of a dry contact relay, it's going to be a powered relay where the 24 volts from the common is allowed to flow through the relay. Anybody have?
Hey, Ryan.
Yes.
Hey, one thing that that I know you always mention is with the add a wire, the PEK, you can kind of repurpose that extra wire and use it for an accessory, right?
Exactly.
So like how would that work in this scenario?
Okay, so can you go back to one of the screens that had a PEK on it? We'll use that as our
Sure.
example. I probably should make a separate drawing for that. But let's say you have this scenario here. So you have 4 wires in the wall. You need 5. Great, you figured that out. We talked about that. But let's say you have a 5-wire scenario already on your old system, but now you want to add the ability to control a humidifier. So you had 5 wires. You already had your old stat, had a common, it had a hot, fan, heat, cool. So now you want to add a humidifier. You need a 6th wire. So what you would do is you'd wire this exactly like it's shown on this drawing here. And then you would use your 5th wire that you own in the wall to go over to the ACC plus terminal from the humidifier. And then you'd pick common up at the furnace. So everything will look exactly like this. We just have one more line from ACC plus downstairs, and it would go to the humidifier. And then the other side of the humidifier would go to common.
Right.
Perfect. We should make a drawing for that at some point. We'll get
Yeah, I can ask our guys if we can get that. That would be nice.
Yeah, it would help people out. Another point on these humidifiers, you saw in both the scenarios, humidifier 1-wire and 2-wire, at neither point did we wire it through the hum terminal on the furnace. A lot of furnaces have a hum terminal on them. And the purpose of that terminal is to interlock the furnace operation with the humidifier. So what normally would happen is that hum terminal on the furnace would only send power out when the gas valve was open. And that does 2 things for us. One, it ensures we don't accidentally run a humidifier when we're in the cooling mode, because that would be stupid. Right? The cooling mode is trying to dehumidify, so why would we humidify? And then 2, it forces us to wait for a heating call because it's easier to throw humidity into warm air. Warmer air can absorb more moisture. We don't have to do it that way, but it's easier. In this case, we're not wiring to the hum terminal, we're wiring to common instead. Because in the thermostat later on, when we go through the configuration with you guys, you'll see that we can choose to interlock it to the heat like a normal hum terminal would have done, or we can choose to run the humidifier without a heat call if we need to get extra humidity. And in both cases, it still wouldn't allow us to do it when we have cooling. So we recommend that you do not wire to the hum terminal, you wire it to the common instead to get your power.
Perfect. Yep, there you go.
Yeah, you could do that and it would work, but you lose options when you're programming it later on. So there's no reason to do that. That's for old school dumb humidifiers that are humidifier controls that don't have any intelligence in them. This one has intelligence to interlock it with outside of cooling on its own.
Okay.
Does anybody have any wiring questions at all? I know 2 weeks ago we did a kind of little short version of it just to kind of get it going, but this would hopefully get you through all the scenarios that you're probably going to wire. I don't see anyone typing any questions in on wiring, so I think we're good on there.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not seeing any either, Ryan. So I'll go through this simulator then. I'll kind of start out on this and we'll do a more basic configuration, then we'll get a little more advanced, and Ryan, just chime in, you know, wherever anything I miss or any points you want to add.
Absolutely.
And then I'll kind of let you go through those more advanced equipment configurations, because sure. I just think in general you understand the equipment side better than I do. So
sure. If you make that window bigger, does everything get bigger?
I don't think so. It's kind of funky how
slightly bigger. It was like a tiny bit bigger.
Is it? Is that a little better?
Yeah, actually it is. It's a little bit bigger. Not much, but a little bit.
Okay. Perfect. So I'm using the SmartThermostat Pro with voice control. So this is the software you're going to see. You're not going to see hardly any differences between the 4 or the Smart Pro. The 3 light, it's going to change. You don't see the little light at the top for Alexa, and then you don't have the accessory control built in with the 3 lights. So also no occupancy built in at the thermostat. So we'll just go with the premium model because there's more we can configure using this one. And for those of you guys that maybe haven't come across the scenario where you have to reset these, there's a few ways you can reset them. So if you go into your menu, you go into your settings, you go down to the bottom here, and you've got reset. There's a couple options. So you can reset just the registration, which means it's going to wipe the user's account. It's not going to change your wiring configuration or your equipment preferences, your equipment thresholds, that kind of stuff won't change. This is basically just saying, kind of like in the scenario where someone moves in and moves out, you sell your house and new owner needs to take over the control of the Ecobee on the wall. You can reset that registration, pulls it off your account. Now they're able to re-register it to a new account. Schedule and preferences. So if you want to just wipe out what the old homeowner was using, or you want to just start over, a clean slate, you can just clear out the schedule in your comfort settings, basically. If you're an Apple user and you're using HomeKit, there's a little QR code that'll pop up on the screen when you pair it. This is how you would disconnect it if you didn't want it linked to your Apple HomeKit account any longer. So for today, I'm going to go in. I'm just going to do a reset all. So reset all is going to be a factory reset, and it's going to warn you, hey, this is going to reconfigure everything. It's going to completely wipe the stat. Are you sure you want to do it? So we'll say yes. Okay. So this boot up screen, this is like our install software that is required to go through when you first power up the thermostat. And if you do a hard reset, you're going to see this. If you put it on the wall out of the box, this is the screen you should see. So if it's a brand new unit, you just click on let's get started. So the thermostat is pretty intuitive as far as picking up what sort of input it needs. So we do things a little different from some of our competitors because we're only going to ask for input and we're only going to display in the settings the options that are relevant. So if you are, only controlling a furnace for your heat, you'll never see any questions or any settings for a heat pump or a boiler, right? So this first screen is just asking to confirm, okay, is this a single transformer, dual transformer setup? For all intents and purposes today, we'll keep it simple on this first round. I'll just say we have one power wire. It's running RC, that's correct. This is programmed to default to just a 2-wire setup. So if you just had like a 24-volt transformer, when Ryan and I do the classes, we bring in a bunch of extra transformers, and you can just run one wire into RC and one into common to power up the thermostat. You can actually register it during the class if you want. So this, by default, is just showing these two terminals that are required to get power to the unit. If I say no, this is not correct, then it gives me the option to modify. So I can pick and choose which terminals I want to activate, right? So we'll just do pretty simple, basic equipment configuration. Just going to add in that fan, first stage heat, first stage cool. One other comment on this screen, if you don't see some of these terminals showing up, right, that probably means you have a bigger issue. There is a low voltage self-identification feature on the sub base. It should pick up that voltage coming through. So if it's not picking up your first stage cooler, your fan or something, it's definitely worth a little investigating. We see a lot that people don't use the common wire, and it causes issues sometimes if that bundle has been nailed through, stapled to a 2x4 in the wall. They may sort of uncover another problem with the voltage because they never had connected that common wire before, or maybe there is a short somewhere. Maybe they're just not getting proper voltage through the common, and that will cause the thermostat at times to reset or something. A lot of times you wouldn't see it show up on the screen here. So you can just go and manually override and pick and choose what you need.
Hey, Pete.
Yeah.
I want to add to, some of the guys do occasionally use Ventstar add wires on these. Normally you wouldn't need to do that. You'd use the PEK and you get you from 4 to 5 wires. But in some cases you need to go from 4 to 6 wires, in which case the PEK is not going to help you. So we use those little Ventstar add wires. The Ventstar add wires will work with these thermostats, but they will not show up on that detection thing. So you will have to manually tell it which 2 wires you did that on. It's kind of like a little quirky thing that happens.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
We also have a question from Roger that I want to answer. He asks, on the Carrier Performance Furnace, the furnace controls the stages, not the thermostat. How would that get wired in? So there's two answers there. So yes, on the Carrier and Bryant furnaces and a few others, they have the ability to control their own staging, meaning you just give it a W1 signal, and the furnace will decide to run stage 1, stage 2, stage 3 in some cases on its own. That would be the not preferred way to install it. It is always better to have the thermostat control the staging and not the furnace. The furnace staging algorithm is the worst way to control the staging. It's a solution because you don't have to pull more wires, but it doesn't give you very good control because the furnace doesn't really have any idea what's going on inside the space. It doesn't know what the temperature is. It doesn't know how fast you're getting to set point. It doesn't know if you're a tenth of a degree away from satisfying. It doesn't know anything. But if you can't pull more wire, that is a way to do it. So in those cases, you would wire it like Pete has shown here with W1 highlighted and not W2, and it will work the same as any other single stage thermostat would have worked. But if you have the ability to add the second wire or use a PEK kit or an add wire or something like that, I would definitely prefer you do it that way if you can do it that way.
All right. Awesome. Thanks, Ryan. That's very helpful. I learn something every time we do these classes.
Me too.
So again, with the accessories, we talked a lot about humidifiers. Same concept with a dehumidifier or ventilator. So I'll just kind of show you different options. If I were to choose a ventilator, then it's going to ask me, is it a 1-wire or 2-wire setup, which Ryan explained earlier. Really goes back to whether that accessory has its own internal power source. And then later in the setup, you're going to see some additional questions about the ventilator. So I'll go back. You'll see, like, is it an HRV? Is it an ERV? It'll give you options as far as runtime on a, your minimum runtime, and different settings for specifically for a ventilator. So I think in this case, the most common accessory, at least in Chicago, is a humidifier. In general, in the northern states, humidification is probably the most common thing we see. Maybe if you go down to Florida or in the deep south, you're going to see dehumidifiers more. But with humidifiers, you've got a couple ways you can program it. So again, is it a 1-wire or 2-wire setup? Just make sure that matches which terminal in the back of the thermostat you've got run into. So if you're just using that one-wire setup, you're always going to be running into the ACC plus. If it's 2-wire, just make sure this matches. Fahrenheit or Celsius, what kind of heat are you running? So I'll get back to the humidifier settings here in a second. The software is kind of set up where it bounces back and forth a little bit. But I'm just going to say, okay, we're using a furnace. So if I choose furnace, I'm only going to see the next series of questions for a furnace. So for example, if I were to choose boiler, it's not going to ask me anything about a fan because you don't have any fan control with hydronics. If I choose furnace, then it's going to say, okay, how do you want to control your fan? Do you want to use the thermostat? Do you want to use the furnace? Do you want the equipment basically to control the fan? And this is one that we get a lot of questions on. And in general, you could use either setting. I think with Carrier Brian equipment, Ryan, you always say just use the equipment, let the furnace control it, right?
Not just for Carrier and Brian. I would tell everybody that. In my opinion, there's never, ever, ever a reason to pick the thermostat on a gas furnace. Never. Only thing different between these two settings is that if you pick the thermostat, then every time the thermostat calls for W, calls for heat, it'll automatically energize G. If you pick furnace, whenever the thermostat calls for W, it doesn't energize G. That's the only thing that I found to be different on these settings. So what we want to do on the gas furnace, since it has the ability to turn the fan on itself, we let the thermostat call for W. The furnace kicks on in the heating mode and it goes through its normal sequence. The normal sequence is to turn the fan on last, not first. So that way the heat exchanger can start warming up. And then when the heat exchanger is a little bit warm, then we turn the fan on to send heat down the duct to people so they don't get a cold blast of air. If you put it on thermostat, then people will always get a cold blast of air every single time their furnace turns on. Now, some pieces of equipment you have to do that. So not a gas furnace, but like if you had a fan coil with a hydronic heating coil in it, right? Yeah. So in that case, the fan coil doesn't even know there is a heating coil. It just I got told to turn the fan on. So then in that case, the thermostat has to take responsibility for turning on the heat and fan together, something like that. And sometimes electric heat's that way too. But on a gas furnace, all you have to do is energize W, and every manufacturer furnace will be able to take care of it from there. Some people mistakenly think that this somehow, by turning it on furnace, means you lose control. It means the thermostat no longer has the ability to turn the fan on if someone wants to just run fan only. That is not true. If you pick furnace, you can still, as a user, turn the fan only mode on if you want to, or to run 20 minutes out of an hour, or any of those things that we'll talk about. On a related note, Ishmael asks, how does this setting work with a variable speed furnace? Exactly the same as I described. There's no difference there. The thermostat doesn't know you have a 1, 2, 3, 5, 10, 45 million speed furnace at all. It has no clue. It just tells the heat to kick on, or it tells the fan to kick on, or both of those. So this setting, you would still put it on the furnace if you had a variable speed furnace.
Okay. So in some commercial applications, right, like maybe high-rise multi-residential type setups where they're using a high-rise heat pump with like a radiant floor heat or something, then that may be a scenario where you'd use the thermostat over the furnace, right? If you don't want the fan to kick on without a heat call or something like that, when you're running that hydronic heat, you don't want cold air blowing, or would you still just use the equipment?
Say it again, Pete. I was actually, honestly, I wasn't listening to you. I was reading the questions coming in. My apologies.
No, that's okay. I was just asking, like, I came across a scenario on a multi-residential setup where they had hydronic in-floor heat, and they had a high-rise heat pump, and they wanted to control the heat pump as a second stage, and they were concerned about cold air blowing, when you're in that first stage of heat. So that might be the scenario where you would say, I'm going to use the thermostat instead of the furnace, or vice versa, right?
Well, that'll probably make it worse, right? So they want the first stage to be the hydronic baseboard, you said?
Right.
So if they set it on thermostat like the screen shows now, then every time their baseboard kicks on, their fan would kick on as well, which they probably do not want.
Right, exactly.
Be reluctant to set it that way.
So you'd almost be better off just programming it as a boiler where there is no fan option.
Right. What in your scenario? What was their second stage of heat? First stage was baseboard.
High-rise heat pump for backup. Kind of an odd setup. But
yeah, the heat pump's the backup. That's weird. Yeah. So I guess we'd have to know more about the heat pump to know if it has the ability to turn its own fan on or not. If it
would on it. It does, yeah.
Then we would pick furnace on here, and then W1 would turn on the baseboard. W2 would turn on the heat pump and its associated fan.
Gotcha. Okay. Perfect. All right. You want to read some of those questions, Ryan? Or?
Yeah. So I'm gonna do one of them here. One of them, somebody was asking about running 120 volts through the ACC terminals for the humidifier, and the answer is no, we cannot do that. I was trying to find the exact rating on it. I think it's 30 volts max at 3 amps, but you definitely cannot run 120 volts for the humidifier through ACC. In fact, you can't run 120 volts to the thermostat at any point in time for any of the terminals. Sean asks, in relation to the screen that we're on now, wouldn't the thermostat have to control it to do humidity on demand? The answer to that would be no. I can pick by thermostat or by furnace, either one, and then later on, and unrelated to this screen, I can tell the humidifier whether I want the humidifier to turn the fan on or not. So literally the only thing this choice does on the screen, the only thing it does is, do I turn my fan on immediately on a heat call, or do I wait? Other than that, this choice has nothing to do with any of the other settings in the whole device. So later on, we'll talk about making the humidifier come on and forcing the fan to go with it. But either one of these choices I pick now, I can still do that with the humidifier. The only other question we have that I didn't answer yet is from Jim, and his is very specific and nichey, and he sent me some screenshots on my text as well. But he's had apparently an issue where the screen protector that comes shipped on the stat, when he peeled it off, it actually somehow peeled off like part of the stat. I've never seen that happen before, and Pete, I can share the pictures that he sent with you later.
Yeah.
But I've never seen that happen before, so I don't know why that would happen. I don't know if maybe the thermostat was stored somewhere where it got really warm and it somehow melted the screen protector plastic to the other plastic. I'm not sure. So I don't have an answer for you on that, Jim, because I've never seen that before. He's asking if there's a specific way you should peel off the screen protector, and I would say no, there's not a specific way. But all the ones I've done, it just comes off really easy.
Yeah, Jim. I've had it come up a handful of times. So, you know, I get everything Ecobee throughout the Midwest. So it's come up a few times. Ryan, please send me the pictures so I can let our QA guys know. But
Yeah.
in general, I think it can happen where, like, especially on the sensor. So you've got the little like kidney bean shaped sensor in the corner of the thermostat screen, and it's a little blue plastic adhesive that goes over there. That's where I have seen it specifically. So if that's kind of what you're experiencing, then yeah, we're aware of it. I think it does have to do with the temperature in transit. You know, if these get put on a container, cargo ship coming over, sometimes those get pretty warm inside. So I think that's kind of been the problem in the past. But if you're seeing something else as far as the adhesive on the main part of the thermostat screen, then I've never heard that before. So.
In either case, I don't think there's a special way you would peel it off. I can't think of anything that would help. But.
No, the sensor surface looks different from the glass thermostat surface, and sometimes people think that there is still some adhesive on there. Our recommendation would be just take like some rubbing alcohol. If you've got a little like stickiness on the sensor, once you get the blue adhesive off, just kind of rub it with some alcohol, and it's not going to damage the occupancy. You should be okay.
All right. Well, I'll send the pictures to Pete, and we'll start a dialogue with Jim separately on that exact one. Thank you, guys.
Okay. Perfect. All right. So I'll continue on here, guys. So back to the humidifier. So remember, I programmed that we were going to control a humidifier through the accessory terminals, and you have the choice between evaporative and steam. So if I were to pick evaporative, and it is an evaporative humidifier, you know, it's an April air, those are the most common ones. What that means in the software is the accessory and the fan will only run during a heat call. So once the furnace is engaged and you're in that heat cycle, the accessory is going to kick on for humidity. If I choose steam and I'm still using an evaporative humidifier, you're kind of tricking the thermostat. The only difference in the software is that you're able to use that accessory with the fan, whether or not there's a call for heat. So if I'm on the steam setting and I've got an evaporative humidifier, I want to maybe, you know, run a hot water line to that humidifier and be able to push humid air, push moisture into the air, whether or not the furnace is on, right? So if you're in a setback and the temperature's dropped pretty low, but you still want that humidifier running, then you're going to want to choose the steam setting. And that's going to allow you to control the humidity to a set point, or it's going to automatically adjust based on the output. We'll go through that in a little bit. But anything to add there, Ryan?
I'll just add that even if the humidity call does force the fan on, it still will not do it during a cooling call. So by picking steam, you're allowed to run the humidifier, like Pete said, during a heat call or during a no call, but not during cool. I would pick steam 100% of the time. There's never a scenario I would put this on evaporative. I would always give the stat the choice of controlling the humidifier whenever it wants to.
All right. Any questions on that before I move on?
David asked a question. I'm not clear on it, but it says, is that a solution for houses where people like lower temps?
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. Like you always mention, Ryan, the wood person,
yeah.
right? Like the wine cellar type.
Yeah, I get his question. Yeah. Exactly. They like house set at 67 or 62 or something crazy like that, and it's like, well, now my humidifier hardly ever runs because my furnace hardly ever runs. Yeah, this would definitely help with that, especially like you said, if they had a lot of wood, or if they had if they have like stringed instruments, like if they're really into their piano or they got a room with like 7 guitars in it, those people want higher humidity than you might otherwise possibly have. Or also now too, like, I don't know if you guys, I'm sure you guys have all been paying attention to news stuff because you have nothing else to do, but higher humidity levels, keeping things like 40 to 55% range, has been shown to be better for some of these viruses that we've been talking about, including the coronavirus. So people are wanting to humidify a little bit higher than they otherwise would have, and waiting for a heat call to do it might not get it done.
That's a great point. Yep.
See, who thought thermostats could help people with their air quality?
Yeah, I mean, I've heard that for years about the flu as well. The drier your house is in the wintertime, the more susceptible you are to getting the flu.
Yeah,
I don't know how that works, but
a graph that shows like all the times when it's dry, all the bad shit that's going to happen, and all the times when it's humid, all the other bad stuff that's going to happen. If you can keep stuff between, we normally said between 30 and 60. Now I'm kind of like trying to hone it into like between 40 and 55%. If you keep it in that range, like the least amount of bad things in your air will happen. Between viruses, bacteria, mold, static electricity shocks, and all that. If you can get it between 40 and 55, that's kind of like the holy grail target there. Less bad things happen.
Nice. All right. Well, there you go. So just moving along here, you've got to name every device. So there are quite a few default names built into the software, so you can use any of these if you want. If you scroll all the way to the bottom, then you can enter your own. So I'll put this, you know, we can call it anything we want. We'll call it, we'll do our Hoger. And what that means is now that I've named it something custom, if I'm going to use the voice control to change my set point or, you know, turn the AC up or down, whatever, you've got that smart speaker functionality where you can talk to Alexa and you can control the thermostat through voice. She just needs to know which device you're talking about. So the name of each thermostat needs to make sense to the homeowner. It's kind of what we tell contractors when you're setting these up for them. Make sure it's something that is pretty simple that they're not gonna, you know, just forget. So like upstairs, downstairs, my Ecobee. You know, if they've got a bunch of different Wi-Fi devices in the house, then maybe they've got some other logic that kind of makes sense in their head that they're just going to remember. So just something to kind of keep in mind. Whatever name you name the thermostat, that's the name that Alexa is going to recognize. You just say, turn my heat up, she won't be able to do anything. So the mode, you can just pick, you know, heat, cool, auto. If you're running a heat pump, which we'll run through, you'll see auxiliary here. If we choose auto, it's going to default to a 5-degree changeover or deadband. You can adjust that down to 2. You can adjust it up to 10. So we'll just go with auto. This is asking, you know, what's my ideal temperature in the wintertime in the house? So like I have mine at 68. I like it a little bit cooler. So this kind of means the thermostat's going to target never really heating above 68. At times, you know, the house is going to warm up a little bit, couple degrees more than this when you're running the oven or whatever as the outdoor temperature rises. But for the most part, just needs those general preferences. Same with the summertime when your AC is running. Do you want it, you know, 72 ideally? Do you want it a little warmer? Just adjust that. Again, if you're not running AC, then you're not going to see this option. If you're just running heat, it's only going to ask you for the heat input. If you want to use the sensors to help save money off your utility bills, the sensors are going to pick up when no one's in the house, and they're going to put the system into a setback mode when no one's there. When the thermostat and the sensors don't pick up occupancy, it will allow that room temperature to rise or fall depending on the time of year. A lot of it depends on how quick your system can recover based on the runtime data we record. A lot of it depends, I mean, it mainly depends on the weather. So if you're in this smart home away mode, you can enable or disable this at the thermostat. This on the software, when you go onto your phone, you're going to see this now under the Eco Plus section. So Eco Plus has some additional features that we covered in the first training. But the main piece of this is that setback. So if you don't want the system to automatically let the room temperature rise or fall when you're gone, then you can disable this. We recommend people use it. So if you do enable it, you're going to save more money. You're going to maximize those savings. You're going to maximize the comfort as well, because it's going to work both ways. So if your schedule says you're away, but you're actually in the house and the sensor picks up that occupancy, then it will kick on the equipment to keep you comfortable as well. So that's what that is all about, the smart home and away feature. Again, you can turn it on or off from your account, from your phone, from a computer. Just select the country. So we give you 1 million countries. It's kind of funny because we really only sell them in the US and Canada. So just pick US. If this is on Wi-Fi, it's going to typically pull in the time and date. So I'm just going to choose Chicago for Central Time. And this is where the simulator software is a little different from the real software. So I'm going to switch back to the slides here. Let me just go down sort of where we left off. So you saw there, it kind of went back to the reset screen. This is what you're typically going to see once you choose your time zone. It's going to bring you to this registration code. And this 4-digit code is unique, and it's going to change every 24 hours. So it's a rolling code. This is the point, as an installer, where you need to get this code to the homeowner or whoever's controlling the thermostat. They'll need this 4-digit code to create, once they create their Ecobee account. If they don't have an account already, they'll go in and they'll create that account. And then the first thing it's going to ask when you go to register your thermostat is this number. So this 4-digit code, again, for security purposes, it's going to change every 24 hours. It's our best way to try to prevent someone from potentially stealing access to your thermostat and maybe trying to sweat you out of your house or something. So once it's registered, it's linked to your account. Only that account has control over the thermostat unless that account owner decides they want to invite some other family members, maybe to have it on their phone as well and be able to control it. So maybe it makes sense real quick if I just run through the app just to show you guys how that looks, and then we can kind of go back and do a heat pump configuration. So once you get to this 4-digit registration code, you need to add it into your account. And this is how the mobile account looks. So most people are going to use their phone to control their Ecobee. Some people might not have a smartphone. You can use an iPad. You can go on a laptop and you can create an account that way. If you don't have an account already, go to create a new account. If you do have an account, just go into your app and you'll set up, basic information, your name, your email address is going to be the username, and then the password. It's not required every time you open the app. So add your address so you can have multiple homes, which I think we talked about a little bit 2 weeks ago. This is kind of a newer feature for those that have a vacation home, for the snowbirds that go down south for the winter. You can have each individual address set up in here. So most people probably just gonna have one address. I don't have the problem of owning a vacation home, so just one location here. Okay, looks right. If they're uncomfortable giving their street address for privacy reasons, you don't have to actually put your house number in. We really just need city, state, and zip code because we just need to be able to pull in the weather data over Wi-Fi. So some people are kind of funny about sharing their actual address, and they don't have to put it in there.
Those same people also bank online, by the way.
They also what?
They also do their banking online.
Yeah.
They always complain about weird stuff like that, and then I'm like, but all the other stuff you do with your money?
Right, it's all on your phone.
I'm gonna pause you for a second to ask a couple of questions. Ishmael asks, do we recommend having the homeowner download the app and have them fill it out before installing a thermostat? Or is it better to install the thermostat and then do the app?
Absolutely. I would recommend to save yourself some time while you're in the house wiring it up. Tell them to go out to their app store and download it and start setting up that account, because they can set up the account and then they can add the device later.
Yeah, they'll only be able to
That'll
get
save you a few minutes
until they put that 4-digit code in, but they can at least get the basic part going.
Right.
Plus,
correct.
keep them entertained while you're doing your stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And then the other thing is with the sensors, we'll come back to that, but with the new sensors, you need to use their account in some cases as well. So
We did have one other question from Roger. He asks, will these thermostats link with the current core thermostat portal? And I'm going to give 2 different answers for that. So there is 2 separate core portals. There is a core contractor portal, so that like Bryant and carrier dealers like Roger would have access to support their customers remotely. These stats will fill into that portal, that core connected portal for contractors will support core thermostats, Ecobee, and Infinity Evolution type stats. Then there's the consumer portals, and there's a core portal for that and an Ecobee portal for that. They kind of sort of, you can kind of work between the 2 of them, as Pete and I have discussed numerous times. But at the moment, the official answer is no. You cannot put the core stats on the Ecobee portal, and you can't put the Ecobee stats on the core portal. It'll let you do it. They'll kind of work. You will lose some functionality that may get resolved in the future. If you have a specific one, let Peter or I know, and we'll talk to you about that one and the best way to deal with it.
Yeah, exactly. It's a complicated situation right now, but eventually I think the goal is to be able to use Ecobee for everything. Well, everything core house-wise, Ecobee at least.
Right. And for those that don't know, the carrier original core with the nice cell phone looking touchscreen and the Bryant Housewise thermostat are both manufactured by Ecobee. And on the communication side, on the back end, they use the Ecobee communication. So even though they're physically different, on the back end, they're kind of the same thing almost. So that's why this question comes up sometimes. There are other core thermostats that have nothing to do with Ecobee, and that's unrelated to this, just so everyone knows.
Right. So we're working through that. It's going to take a little while to figure it all out, but yeah, let us know if you've got specific issues, and we'll help get them resolved. No problem. So in the app, this is the point where, if you're kind of standing next to the homeowner, you can walk them through this. If they're not there, then you just want to explain to them, go in to register your device. There's a little green plus mark at the top. So I don't have that screenshot here, but choose the location you're adding it under, choose which device it is, and then it's going to walk them through, is it already powered up, installed on the wall? Yes, it's on the wall. If you hit no, then this will take them to like a step-by-step video guide, which they're not going to need because you've already done it for them. Just make sure, you say, yeah, it's already on the wall, and boom, here's where that code goes. So that's the 4-digit code that I showed you earlier off the screen. You're only going to see it on the screen of the thermostat. If the homeowner is not there and you write this code down or you send a picture to them or something, they might wait a day and that code could change. So if that happens and you get that phone call a couple days later, like, hey, thanks for setting up my thermostat, but you gave me the code and it's not working, then all you need to do is have them go to the thermostat, and I'll kind of show you best I can. If you go into the settings here, you're going to see in your menu at the top registration on the screen, and they'll be able to go every 24 hours and access that new code. So all you need to do is tell them, walk up to your thermostat, go to the menu, click on registration, then it's going to show you that 4-digit registration code, and that's where you're going to put it into your app now. And that'll connect the Ecobee to the account, and now they should see this all systems go screen, and you should have full control over it. The other thing I'll just cover real quick while we're in the presentation deck here is let's talk about the sensors. Our original room sensors were not encrypted, and we had to change that. We take privacy very serious, and the reason the process has changed is because we've put an encryption chip in the new smart sensors. So the original sensor did not have this. That meant that in theory, someone could maybe access that occupancy data, and they could kind of tell when people are home and when they're not home, try to figure out your schedule or something. The new sensors now, like all of our products, are dual encrypted. So there is an encryption key that needs to be loaded onto the thermostat in this sensor. What that means is, out of the box, today, probably what you're seeing is you've got to use the mobile app to pair the sensor to the thermostat. What we have already changed, actually, and which may already be taking effect, kind of depends on how long it takes for the inventory to hit. But on any current production model out of the plant, they are pairing these in the box. So that's the sensor that comes with the Smart Pro thermostat will be pre-paired with that encryption code. So the thermostat will already have it preloaded, which means that you go back to the original process, you pull the plastic tab, the sensor automatically connects to the thermostat. What that also means is if they buy additional sensors in like a 2-pack, they're gonna have to use this pairing process where they use a phone or the homeowner's account. So I'll run through that now. So if you don't have a pre-paired sensor in the box, or they buy additional room sensors they need to add, they're gonna be this style only, this newer style with the metal stand. And you're gonna use their account, ideally a smartphone if the homeowner has their phone. If you need to log in on a laptop or something, you can do it that way as well. But if you're using a phone, you go into the menu, go to sensors, and then at the bottom, you see this little green plus mark, add sensor. So once you click that, you can see like this user already has some sensors added. It's gonna ask you which one. Is it our original room sensor? Because if it is, you're just gonna go to the thermostat and do it in front of the stat. It's more simple. If it's the encrypted smart sensor, then choose that at the top. And the software will ask, can we take over the camera on the phone? Hit okay if they're fine with that. As you see down at the bottom here, you've got this manual option as well, manually enter code. It's easiest to just use the phone camera. You've got a little QR code on the plastic tab. If you pop the battery out of the back of the sensor here, you see the same data matrix printed. It's hard printed in the sensor as well. So if you lose this little plastic tab, pop the battery out and you can do it that way. Underneath here, we don't have a picture that shows it, but you also have a manual pairing code. It's 6 digits, it's like an alphanumeric number, or code, I should say. And you can manually type in that pairing code if you lose the little plastic tab or if you don't have a smartphone with a camera. Once you scan it, it'll instruct you pull the tab out. It's gonna make battery contact now with the sensor, and then it'll ask you to give the sensor a name. So just like the thermostat, you can custom name these. Most people are just gonna use the default name based on where they've got the sensor located in their house. So however they wanna do that, assign it to the thermostat in your house. So if you've got a couple thermostats, it's gonna give you the option, which one do you wanna pair to, and then that's it. So questions on that? I'm guessing we'll have a few.
I didn't have any on that yet, but there are some other questions. So David asks, do they make smart sensors that can mount on the wall instead of just the tabletop ones?
Yes, absolutely. Any of our sensors will come with a drywall option. So with the new one, let me go up to the right slide here so I can show them a picture. The new sensor, if you can see here, David, there's a little bracket. So most people use the stand and just set it on a bookshelf or something, but you've got a flush wall bracket if you want to put it flat, and this is like an angled version. And they have a little 3M adhesive on the back as well. So pretty strong adhesive. You can just stick it up there. I would recommend just put a drywall anchor in this little angle bracket. You just turn it one way or another, and it allows you to point the face of the sensor up or down if you want. What other questions?
There's a few, but I think we're going to get to them when we do some of the other parts here. So I probably could go back. Maybe we should go back to the demo and do the advanced settings on the furnace stuff, and then we can switch it over and do a heat pump.
Okay.
You want me to drive, or you want to drive?
If you want to try, Ryan, yeah, go for it.
On the top of the GoToMeeting, click that sharing button, and then click Give Mouse and Keyboard. and then I'll quickly hack into your bank account while I'm in there.
Perfect. Okay, there you go.
Let's see. I've never actually done this. It actually worked pretty well.
Good.
Did we?
I didn't know if there'd be a delay, but
Yeah. I think it went back to it reset on us because we took so long. So we just got to lie to it.
Reset. Yeah, it didn't take us to the registration screen. It just reset.
Well, I think we timed out after being so long on the other screens. So we're just gonna get us caught back up real quick to where we were. All right, almost there. All right. So there's a few other things off the stat here that we can deal with. So for starters, if you just set the stat up and you're not the consumer, they can come back here at any point in time and get that registration code, and they can register it online to connect to their app and their portal. System button, self-explanatory. Normal AC mode choices, you can switch between them. The fan itself, you can tell it you want to run X minutes out of each hour. So if you're trying to do this for some kind of code compliance, or they're trying to do a better job with indoor air quality and they want to run their fan more, but they don't want to run it all the time, something like that, you can make that choice there. Humidifier settings, you can tell it you want to run at a specific set point, or you can choose the frost control, which allows it to use the outdoor air temperature to reset the humidity set point to try to avoid frosting up the windows. So all those normal settings like you've seen before. Sensors, Pete talked about all of those, but as you add more sensors, they'll be listed here. And then once you have more than one, you can choose which ones apply to which schedules. And we did that, I think, 2 weeks ago. So we'll leave that topic alone for now. Scheduling, pretty self-explanatory there. When are you home? When are you away? When are you sleeping? After you configure, usually what I do is I configure Monday and get it all perfect. And then I copy Monday to the other days of the week, and then I tweak the weekend. That seems to be like the easiest way to do it. Comfort settings, you can adjust your settings for home, away, and sleep independent of the time schedule. You need to do it this way, so that way when you have things like smart home away enabled, it knows what you want when you're home, unrelated to the time clock. So you don't do your settings. From the schedule. You do it from here. And you can change any of these to whatever you want them to be. You need them to be warmer, colder, whatever. Oops. All right. I'm going through these fast because I want to get to the more complicated stuff for you guys. All right. Vacation is pretty self-explanatory as well. You just tell it, hey, I'm leaving at a certain time, whatever time you're leaving. I'm coming back at a certain time, whenever that's going to be. And then what do you want to happen when you're gone? I want it to do heating and I want it to do cooling, and I don't want to run the fan. Okay, great. You can tell it those things. And then save it, and it'll go into those vacation modes. And then it'll list all
Ryan, here. Hey, just one comment on that, Ryan. So any of those settings that Ryan just went through, you can do on your phone, which is a lot easier.
Yeah.
But the vacation mode is really like a one-off event, and it's going to ignore any occupancy. It's just going to hold the temperature. So if someone like comes into your house when you're gone for a couple weeks and you just want it to stay at 60, those room sensors aren't going to cause the equipment to kick on.
Exactly. Like if somebody's coming in to take care of your plants or something weird like that, it doesn't affect it at all. It just stays in vacation mode. Perfect. Yep. Reminders and alerts. If you had any reminders or alerts, you could read them there. We don't have any because it's a brand new install. But down here on preferences, I can set some of those up. So you can have a general maintenance alert. So you could say every X amount of months, I want an icon to pop up on their device saying, hey, it's time to do your maintenance. So if you install this today in April, you may want it to pop up in September. So you may put it at 5 months that you want something to pop up, and then they have to, give you a call to come out and do the furnace maintenance or whatever. You can do that generic maintenance reminder. There's a filter reminder. I'm not a fan of filter reminders because you have to either pick how many months, or at least in this case, how many fan hours. You can do either one. and it'll tell you that the filter's dirty. It only really works though if somebody pays attention to it that first year and figures out how many months or hours it takes to get dirty. Other than that, it's just a kind of a guess. But that is there for those that want to use it. Humidifier filter, same kind of deal. If you have a humidifier, I don't know why they call it a humidifier filter. It should say humidifier pad. That's just a poor language choice. But if you install the humidifier now, you probably wouldn't want to come back until like next spring and do the humidifier pad. Hopefully all of you guys have switched to humidifier pad changes for the spring instead of the fall maintenance. I've been trying to encourage you guys to do that because waiting till next fall to change a disgusting moldy looking humidifier pad makes no sense. I would change it in May, and then it's nice and clean sitting there doing nothing all summer, and I'm not having this moldy thing sitting in my duct, and then it's ready to go for the fall anyway. UV lamp, if you have a UV lamp, or if you have an air purifier that has a bulb in it, how often do you want to change the bulb? And you can specify that here. 12 months would be the normal scenario. And then we have temperature and humidity alerts. So what I normally do on those is I like to have these alerts on there, and I normally set them for 5 degrees wider than my away set point. So if my away set point is going to be 60 degrees at the house, I'll set my alarm for 55. If I can get there. The slide bar is always so touchy, especially with the delayed response through the internet here. But I would set that for 55. That way, if it gets further out from the 60 that they'd ever want, then I'll get an alarm. And I would do the same thing on the high temp. If the highest I'm ever going to make it is 80 when I'm away, I'd set the alarm for 85. Low humidity, I would also set that. Usually I set that at 10%. If they have a humidifier or not, I'll set it at 10%. And then if it ever gets below 10% in their house, I'm going to get an alarm. If they don't have a humidifier, they'll call me and say, hey, why do I have this humidity alarm? What the heck is that? And I'm like, well, remember, Mrs. Jones, you didn't buy a humidifier from us? Would you like to have us install one now? And then they'll say yes or no. And if they say no, I'll tell them how to turn the alarm off. If they say yes, we'll go install it. High humidity alert, I usually set that for 65%. I try to keep the house under 60 for the reasons we discussed previously. So if it gets up to 65, that means bad stuff's happening. So we would go into an alarm there. Displaying the alarms on the thermostat, normally I would say yes to that. The exception would be if this is like a like an Airbnb type place or something like that. We're going to rent it out to people all the time. Then maybe I don't want them to see all the alarms that pop up on my stat. It's none of their business that it's time to change the filter, because then they're going to get all weird about it. Enable heating and cooling alerts. I would turn that on as well. It's already on, but I would leave it on. This is the stat's pretty smart. So it'll send you an alarm saying something like, hey, we've been trying to heat your house for 3.5 hours and the temperature's only gone up 0.5 degree. We think something's wrong. So if you have that enabled, you can get those kind of alarms emailed to you. Let's see if we have any questions before we go to the advanced settings things here real quick. Adrian asks, if I have a lot of sensors, is there any way to know which one is which? I guess you could go ahead.
Yeah, I can answer that, Ryan. There's a 4-digit alphanumeric code on the back of each sensor. It's printed on each one. And if you go into the thermostat settings and you go under sensors, it'll show you the name of the sensor, but it'll also show you the code. So there's always that way to identify them based on that unique 4-digit, like alphanumeric number. I don't know if you're gonna see it on the simulator.
Yeah,
it always shows like disconnected, but you can, if you just play around in the settings on the thermostat, that's how you'd identify them.
Ferris asks if the software in the thermostat is capable of using different languages.
Oh, no, that's a big one. We've had that question a lot. I think it would be great if we had a couple options like Spanish especially, but not today. It's not possible. You can configure Alexa for quite a few different languages, so you could speak a different language to the voice control to change things, but you're not going to see the screen. The text on the screen will only be in English.
Ishmael asked a question I think we covered last week, but he's asking about mounting thermostats on the wall when they have a junction box.
Yeah, I covered that a couple weeks back, but we do have a plate. So we're about to launch that, and all our distributors will carry them. So you could go to a TEC branch and pick up that mounting plate. Give give us a few more weeks here, hopefully, and it'll be out there.
Cool. I think we're caught up on questions. So let's go back to the demo here. On the About button, you can just see some basic info on the stat, like the name of it, the IP address. If you're having trouble with internet access, like for example, you're able to connect to Wi-Fi, but you can't connect to the portal, it usually means that your router or your firewall is blocking some traffic. But if you need to troubleshoot that stuff, you might be able to come in here and see a little bit more detail as you're talking to whoever is going to be helping you with troubleshooting the Wi-Fi issues at your building. So there's just some basic info on there. The settings button here has a bunch of extra meat to it, if you will. So we'll hit a couple of these. Date and time we already covered during setup, but if you wanted to change something like a time zone or something, you could do that there. Preferences, the temperature display, Fahrenheit or Celsius, self-explanatory. Heating range, in this case 45 to 79. Maybe I don't want my family and users to be able to get that low, so maybe I might say, you know what, you guys can't jack this down below 62. That's about as far as I'm going to let you go. And there's no way I'm letting you put the heat at 79, right? So maybe I'll put it like a little tighter range. Give people some control, but not let them be crazy with it. And then I can do the same thing with the cooling range. The name can be changed again here, just like we did it during startup. We could go back and change it later on if they want to change it. If the Alexa sounds are annoying to them or whatnot, you can change that depending on where this device is located. Screen brightness, kind of self-explanatory there. I will mention down here the checkbox though. If this stat is installed in a bedroom, which sometimes happens on multiple zone systems, you may want to check this box. Then when their stat's in the sleep mode, then it won't be like a beacon light there. Some people like it because it's like a night light. Some people don't like it. It just depends. But you can have it go completely black if you want by checking that box when it's in the sleep mode. How long is it going to stay lit after you touch it? That's self-explanatory. The hold action is a pretty important one. When someone overrides the set point on the stat, what do you want to happen? Do you want to give them a 2-hour override, 4-hour override, override it until the next schedule? So if I override it right now, maybe it stays overridden until 6 p.m. when my next schedule kicks in. Override it forever, which means until I change it. Or I don't have any idea what I want to do, so every single time I override something, I want you to ask me which of these 4 things I meant to do at that moment. But some people will have it, it'll be on like that, and they'll be like, well, I put it in hold, and like later on, it goes back to being normal again. Yeah, exactly. If they want it to be hold forever, which defeats some of the purposes of having a cool stat like this, but if they want to hold it forever, you can do it like that. The smart recovery, for whatever reason, you can do it independently for heating and cooling. But what smart recovery does is it allows the thermostat to use the knowledge it has on your house. It builds a profile of your house. It knows how long it's been taking to heat and cool your house every morning based on whatever temperatures you have and whatever outdoor temperatures that there have been. So it builds a profile of your house as it learns it. And then the next days, it'll be able to start more accurately. So if you say I want to be occupied set point at 6:30 a.m., it may start at 5:58 to get to temperature at 6:30. And then a different day may start at 5:19 because it knows, hey, it's milder out. I don't have to do as much work. It's actually a pretty cool feature. The only thing that kind of sucks about it is it takes a little while to learn the house. So some people have it on and then they get frustrated. You got to let it run a month or two so it learns the house and how long it takes to heat things at different temperatures outside. And then after that, it becomes pretty sweet. You just got to be a little patient at the beginning. Wi-Fi, we talked about those settings already. Access control, if I enable that, which I'm not going to do right now, I can, well, I guess we could just click on it. We'll just do 1, 1, 1, 1, so I don't forget what it is. Don't do that on a real house, but just for right now on the demo. And then I could tell it which things I want to give people, lock people out of. I want to lock them out of the stat completely. They can't do anything. I'm lockdown dad. Nobody touches my stat. Or I want to let them change some basic things like override the temperature if they're hot. But I don't want them getting into my system settings or messing with my schedules and stuff like that. So you can do that on the stat. And then every time they try to change something that's more one of these things, they'd have to enter the passcode. And you would make the passcode. Don't pick 111. That was just an example. All right, so then the last one here, install settings. Normally you wouldn't have to go in here. This is if you want to tweak something, you got something special you want to do, you don't like some of the defaults. There's 3 different categories here. One is the equipment. I can see how it was wired. Obviously, I just started it up, so I know what I wired. But if I'm going to somebody else's job site and something's not working, like, hey, it never kicks on second stage heat. All right, well, let's see if this dude ever configured it to have 2 stages of heat. Maybe he didn't. Under the furnace, if I want to go back and change that choice, I can. When we did it during startup, they called it thermostat and furnace. When you go and look at it in here, they call it Ecobee thermostat and HVAC. I'm not sure why the language is different, but it's the same thing. You can change your mind if you wanted to. Humidifier, if you want to change your mind on that, you configured it for evaporative, but then now you heard this webinar and you're like, damn, I should have configured it for steam. Pete and Ryan said that's a better way to go. You can come back in here and change that. You can also change the cycling on it. So right now it's a 5% cycle, which means that if it's it'll kick on at 30% humidity, it'll humidify it up to 35% and then kick it off, kind of thing. If you want to make that a little tighter or a little wider, you can do that. I don't know why you would, but you could do that. The window efficiency, if you're using the frost control, how good of a window do you have? So you can kind of pick that range on here. And as you learn more about the house, or the homeowner learns more about the house, you can do that. So if the windows are frosting up, you can tweak this and make it a little bit different. And I'm not going to reconfigure equipment because that basically reboots what we just did. But the only time you would reconfigure equipment is if you put different equipment in. Like they got the stats on the wall and then you just upgraded them to a 2-stage furnace and 2-stage AC, you would reconfigure the equipment to do that. The thresholds is where all the detailed stuff is at. Auto mode, if for some reason they don't want an auto mode, like maybe that she's like, hey, my husband always keeps putting it in auto and I hate auto, I want to pick only heat and only cool. All right, you know what, we'll take the auto button away. You'll never see the auto button ever again. You can do that if you wanted to. Heat cool minimum delta, it'll force this temperature difference between the heating and cooling set point at all times. So if your heating set point is 70, your cooling set point could be no lower than 75. If you walked up to it and bumped it down from 75 to 73, it would shove the heating set point down from 70 to 68 and always keep that 5-degree delta between them. The bigger the number, the more energy you'll save. The smaller the number, the more tighter your temperature control will be. 2 is the closest you can go. At no point in time on this stat or any thermostat can you ever have the cooling set point below the heating set point. We call that an inverted set point. That's not possible. You can't say I want to cool it to 68 and then heat it to 72. Because then if it's 70 in the house, what do you want me to do? I'm going to heat it or cool it? You can't handle that, obviously. So cooling always has to stay above heating, and the closest they can get would be 2 degrees. So normally, like, depends on the house, but like at my house, well, at my house I actually have mine. I have mine all the way up at 12. I have a different stat. I have an infinity one, but normal people, probably 6 is probably good for a normal house. Configure staging automatically is the normal scenario. I like to put it in manual. If you have older stats, older versions of these stats with the software, you wouldn't have had this choice. So now you have to tell it you want automatic or manual. And if you pick manual, other stuff becomes active down here later on. If you pick automatic, you don't see some of this stuff. Compressor minimum off time. So 30 seconds means 5 minutes. There's no reason to make it faster than that. If the compressor comes on and off too rapidly, that obviously beats up the compressor. Not to mention it's crappy for dehumidification control. Compressor minimum outdoor temperature. And remember, right now we're on an AC system, not a heat pump. So there's a different setting like this for heat pumps, and it's unrelated. This is a cooling setting. What's the coldest you want the compressor to be able to run at outside? I normally put that up at 55. Nobody should probably at a residential house be running their compressor below 55 degrees. AC overcool max. I turn this on 100% of the time. I wish it was defaulted on. I do not know why it's not defaulted on, but I put it on 100% of the time. I usually put it for 3 degrees, although in some cases I put it at 2 or 2.5. So 3 degrees, what that means is if I set my cooling set point for, let's say I set it for 76 degrees. If my cooling is satisfied and it's 76 in the house, but my humidity is high, it'll run the cooling. It'll energize Y1 to run the cooling, and it'll allow me to start overcooling a little bit for the purpose of dehumidifying, but it will only do it, in my case, for a maximum of 3 degrees. So it'll do it at 76 degrees until the humidity is satisfied, or if it gets down to 73, then it'll say, you know what, time out, dude. We've overcooled too much. That's enough. Turn off the cooling. So that feature is really good for dehumidifying. Once you enable that, then what you can do, if you're back on the system settings here, we have one new one that's added on here that wasn't there before. So you have to turn it on in the advanced settings. Then you have to come in here and tell it you want to use the feature. And then what humidity do you want? I normally set it for 56. I'd like to set it for 55, but it doesn't do that, so I set it for 56. That means that it can get up to like as high as 61% and then drive it back down to 56 for me. It's kind of the logic there. So I would turn that on for all systems without exception. Let's go back to where we were. We were on install. We were on thresholds. We were on AC overcool max we turned on. Heat temperature differential. This means that when the thermostat gets a half a degree from set point, it'll engage the heat. So if your heating set point is set at 70, it'll turn the heat on at 69.5 and heat it back up to 70. Half a degree is normal. You can leave it there. Some people put it at 1 degree, and that's okay. I would never put it more than 1 degree because people will start complaining. If I set it for 70 and it doesn't kick on until it's 67, what the hell, man? It would be a little bit crazy. So half a degree is good. One degree is okay. I would never go higher. Heat dissipation time. This tells the thermostat to run the G signal on the fan to cool down the heat exchanger after the heat cycle is over. So the gas valve shuts off. I have a lot of residual heat in the heat exchanger. I want to continue running the fan to take those BTUs from the heat exchanger and send them into the house, as opposed to letting them escape up the flue if I shut the blower off. You can leave it on auto. That's fine. If you have a specific time you want to do it, you can do that as well. A lot of furnaces already do this on their own. So there's kind of like multiple ways it can get done. Heat minimum on time, 5 minutes is probably pretty good. I don't know why you need to turn the heat on shorter time than that. That would be crazy. And then the cooling set points are kind of the same. Cooling differential, cool dissipation time. In this case, though, I want you to come into this every job so far and turn it off. Where's the off at? Do we not have off anymore? I have to go to my one on my wall and see. Oh, 0.
0. Yeah.
There
you go.
So turn this off. After a cooling call, you do not want to run the fan. If you leave this on auto or put any number of seconds in there, it'll run the fan after the cooling call is over, which means it takes the moisture off your coil and blows it back into your air, which completely defeats the purpose of dehumidifying. So definitely turn this off unless you're doing a house in like Tucson for your buddy where it's super dry. Other than that, do not use this feature. Do not turn it on in the Midwest. It's bad. Compressor minimum on time, 5 is pretty good. I don't know that you need to go any faster than that. Compressor reverse staging, I like to turn this on. Now, some of these ones down here, I had to put it in manual to get these. If I left that setting on auto earlier, I would not have had access to these. And you can leave it on auto, and that's fine. I'm anal, so I like to do it myself. But I like to turn on the reverse staging. So on a 2-stage system, what that'll do, a normal thermostat, or if I have this on manual, or have this on off, excuse me, when it stages, let's say my cooling set point is 75. So at 75.5, it turns on first stage, and then at 77, it turns on stage 2. And then both of those stages continue to run until I get all the way back down to 75 and they shut off together. However, if I turn reverse staging on, stage 1 would turn on at 75.5, stage 2 would turn on at 77, then stage 2 would turn back off at 75.5 again, and I would continue running only one stage to get me the rest of the way down there. I like to do it that way because it causes stage 1 to run a longer time frame, which gets me more dehumidification. So I would recommend you turn that on. Same with the heating scenario. If you do turn that on, now you see it says it invalid. So now, because I'm doing manual staging, I got to tell it when to stage. So I would put that at 2 degrees. So in my example, that was 75 set point, stage 2 kicks on at 77, stage 1 kicked on at 75.5. Heating would work the same way, so we can skip that for this discussion, but it would work the exact same way if you turn the staging on. Temperature correction, if your sensor was off by a little bit in the stat, or it wasn't matching exactly what the customer wanted, they have some mercury bulb on their counter and it's got to match that. Man, your stat's so wrong. You can argue all day. Pete and I can send you specs on the stat telling you how accurate it is and how awesome it is. The homeowner doesn't care. This person that lives there thinks it's 70. Your stat says it's 72. You know what? I don't know what to tell you. I'm just going to take 2 degrees off of my stat. So now my 72 says 70 and it matches what this person wants. I'll just give in and it's like, all right, that's fine. I don't care if it's right or wrong. It matches what they want. They're happy. Same thing with the humidity correction. You can do the same thing to match whatever they want the humidity to read. Thermal protect, if you have multiple sensors, so maybe you want to come, and depending on where your sensors are at, but like a lot of mine, I'll set them at 15 degrees, which I know is pretty extreme. But let's say I have two sensors, one in the thermostat, one upstairs. If they ever get 15 degrees apart, then I want this thermostat to tell me, because that means probably one of them is broken. Like if it's more than 15 degrees between upstairs and downstairs, something bad has happened. So I usually turn that on. Installer code, do not turn this on. I repeat, do not turn this on unless you know the installer code. If you don't know the code, do not turn it on, because then you're going to be locked out of it. This code is different than the one we looked at before. That homeowner code allows them to lock their spouse and kids out of the stat. This one allows you to lock them out of the screens that we're in right now. I forget what the code is. Do you happen to know what it is, Pete?
Yeah, it's always 3262. If you guys on the line want to write that down, 3262 is the only code. Like you can't change it, you can't customize it, but that will unlock it.
Yeah. So I like to turn that on, because someone who doesn't know that code is also the same person who shouldn't be in these screens. And if you can't find the code by looking it up in the user pro manuals, you also shouldn't be in these screens. Test mode, I want you to use this when you're doing your startup on your equipment. Do not go to the thermostat and jack the set point really low and think that the thermostat's going to call for 2 stages of cooling so you can charge your unit. Do not jack it up really high and think it's going to call for 2 stages of heat so you can set the gas pressure on your unit. This stat is trying to avoid second stage, because that's inefficient. It's trying to do whatever it can on stage 1. So when I'm testing my equipment, in order to avoid that, skip all those delays, and just make it happen, I'd rather come in here to the test mode instead of jacking the set point up and say, let's touch stage 1, make sure it runs. Cool. Now let's touch stage 2, make sure it runs, and now I can go charge my unit. And I can do the same thing for heat. Let's test stage 1, make sure it works. Do stage 2, go set my gas pressure. I can test the fan and make sure it works independently if I want to do that, and the same with my humidifier. So test it from here to make sure you wired it correctly, make sure it runs correctly, equipment-wise. Do not mess around with the set points to try to get these things to happen. I think that's all these settings. Let's see what other questions we had. Shane asks, if the access code is lost, can it ever be removed if the device is offline? So the installer access code, obviously we can't lose that because it's the same for every single stat. But on the homeowner access code, which was access right here, if the homeowner puts in a security code and then forgets it, they can go to the portal online and they can unlock it from there. Now, if they put a passcode in here and they forget how to log into their portal because they forgot that password as well, then they're kind of stuck. At that point, they'd have to call Ecobee and try to get a workaround for that. There's not anything you could do as an installer to help them.
No. If you call tech support or call me, we can quickly tell you what the last 4-digit code was to unlock it. I mean, if it's not on Wi-Fi or something, then they can still see what that last code was, and that should work. But they're going to vet out, they're going to ask you, what company are you with, where you're located, just to make sure it's like not something, I don't know, suspicious, I guess. But...
Oh, dang it. What was it?
What? Did you, 3262?
Ishmael asked on the test equipment, how long do these tests run for? They don't shut off. Every time I've used it, I mean, it just stays there. Like if you left it there for the whole day, it would still be on there the whole day. So there's good and bad to that. The good news is it doesn't shut off while in the middle of you doing your equipment work, which is great. The bad news is when you leave and get in your truck and drive away, if you forgot to take it out of this mode, the customer is going to eventually call you and be like, dude, it's freezing in here. What the hell, man? So at that point, you have to tell them, oh, I'm sorry, I left it in test mode. If you can just go up to the stat and just hit that back arrow a couple times, it'll get you out. But I've left it go on mine for a long time, and I've never had it like time out on me or anything like that. It just keeps going. Barris asked if they can get this simulator demo. Unfortunately, we cannot get it, which is why I'm driving it from Pete's computer remotely, because this software that's in here is the same software that's in the stats, which is proprietary. And if they started giving it to everybody, somebody would accidentally give it, not accidentally, but jerkishly give it to a competitor or something like that. So, to the best of my knowledge, this is not something that's accessible to the public. We're just using it because we had no way to do a real live class with you guys today without it. So, and Pete works at Ecobee, so he has it. That's why we're using it today.
Yeah, Ferris, that's it's a really common one lately. We get that question a lot, and we have a big meeting every 6 months. So at the next one, I'm definitely going to bring that up again, that we need to offer some sort of web-based tool for you guys. I think that would be the answer. We just, it's a file today, and we're afraid that if that file were to fall into the wrong hands, it could hurt us. So that's why they don't give it out.
Yeah, web-based would be fantastic. That's what some of like our economizer controller vendors do and stuff like that, and it works really good. In the meantime, Ferris, if you're trying to like do this with your text or something like that, what you can do is you can take a 24-volt thermostat and power up a thermostat on your desk. Just wire it to RC and common, and the stat will power up with just those two wires. And then when you configure it, lie to it and say I have a W1, a W2, a Y1, a Y2, and you'll be able to do anything you want from a software standpoint and play with it physically in your hand or on your table. We do that in the live classes. We do it that way. But today, obviously, we couldn't do it that way, so we had to do this way.
Yeah, and I can always get you guys a demo if you need one for that purpose. Just let me know. It's peter.w@ecobee.com is my email.
Ishmael also asked, how often are updates being uploaded with connecting to the homeowner's? How often are updates being uploaded with connecting to the homeowner's Wi-Fi? I'm thinking he's asking how often does Ecobee push software updates to the thermostat, I think is what he's asking.
Yeah. So there are firmware updates that come through every month. It just depends on how often they need to push something out, but I'd say on average it's about once or twice a month, and it just is pushed out over Wi-Fi. The only time it's like a major update is when like that software revision changes. It's like 1.2.32 or whatever. If it's a major change, that might be like every 6 months or so, 6 months or a year. So not very often.
Andrew asks, is the only color black, the thermostat?
Yep, just like a Ford Model T. You can get it in any color as long as it's black.
All right, if you guys have any more questions, type them in. I know we're 3 minutes over. I'm going to switch this over to a heat pump real quick, just so we can look at a couple settings that are going to be a little bit different on a heat pump. I'll leave everything else the same, and we can skip the other questions. So one thing that's different during the install, it'll ask you if it's air-to-air or if it's a geothermal heat pump. Most of the time, it's probably going to be air-to-air for what you guys are doing. And then you got to tell it which way your reversing valve works. This is dependent upon your heat pump. And you guys probably know the reason it says O/B is because one terminal does two jobs. It can be an O or it can be a B, which means does it turn on heating when I am reversing the valve, or does it turn on cooling when I reverse the valve? That is specific to the manufacturer of heat pump you have. If you don't know, you got to look at the heat pump manual to see which one it wants to have. For today's purposes, it doesn't matter because I don't have a real heat pump, so I'm just going to plow through there. Do you want to allow the heat pump and the auxiliary heat to run simultaneously? If your auxiliary heat is a gas furnace, you will say no. We don't want to run the gas furnace with the heat pump. There are some inherent dangers in doing so. For one, the heat rises too high, but for two, we don't want to have an open flame while we have the refrigerant being pressurized continuously. But if you have a heat pump and your auxiliary heat is electric heat, or if it's a hydronic coil, then I do want to do that. You definitely want to run the auxiliary heat and the heat pump simultaneously. A lot of people make that mistake, and then they shut their heat pump off when it gets cold outside and use 100% electric heat. A heat pump is 250 to 350% efficient, whereas electric heat is only 100% efficient. I'd rather get the heat pump to do all the work and not the auxiliary heater. So definitely let them run simultaneously. For you guys that know heat pumps, as it gets colder outside, it's harder for it to extract heat from outdoors. So I can't get as much heat out of it as the outdoor air temperature drops, which is why the auxiliary heater needs to come in and help them out. But I want them to be auxiliary and help them out. I don't want them to replace the heat pump. I want them to help the heat pump. So leave that on enable if you have electric heat or hydronic heat. when do you want the compressor, what temperature do you want the compressor to lock out at for the heat mode? So what do you want to do that for? So if I have to give you a single answer, I'm going to say 20 degrees. Most heat pumps can go well below 20 degrees, so you would have it something lower. Like, for example, if you do carrier heat pumps, with the exception of the 5-stage one, they can all go down to 0 degrees. If you have the 5-stage carrier O'Brien, it could go down to 10. But the reason I said 20 is a safe number for every heat pump, because every heat pump manufacturer tests their heat pump at 47 and 17 degrees when they send their data into AHRI. So everybody's tested at 17, so obviously everybody can run at 17. So if you know nothing about the heat pump at all, make it be 20. If you know more about the heat pump, make it be something lower. I don't know any time you want it to be something higher than that. What kind of heating do you have? And then the same questions we had before with the thermostat and furnace. Same humidifier question we had before. So that would be the difference on the startup on there. The other thing that would be different now is when I go to thresholds, I will have a few different things that are different. That was a dumb way to say that. A few different things that are different. So, okay, I actually just misspoke. When we did the startup, the question it was asking me before when I said the 0, 10, 17, 20 degree number, that was actually the cooling minimum. So that screen was not very useful. That screen needs to be worded differently, I think. So that one I would set for 55. So I should have set that for 55 when I started it up. The one I was really wanting to change is this one here. That 35 is too high. I would lower that one down to 17 for every heat pump. And I might make it lower if I know more about the heat pump. But right now I don't know anything about it, so I'm gonna make it 17.
Yeah, I think that's why that screen defaults to disable in the setup. But anyways.
So on that screen, what it actually was, it had nothing to do with the heat pump at all. It was just the cooling mode because it showed up over here. So disable meant that I can run the compressor for cooling at any temperature I want. Okay, I see what you're saying. So I can't actually, I gotta leave it on disabled for a heat pump.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's what you would recommend. I guess just assuming that you're never going to run it in
cooling,
right?
Not lock it off. I'd like to do it that way. So ignore everything I just said for the last 40 seconds. Leave that.
Sorry, I should have said that earlier, Ryan.
He said leave it on disabled, leave it on disabled, and change this one, the auxiliary heat, from 35 down to something lower. Wait, did I do that right? Auxiliary heat max.
Yep.
Okay, that's not right either. Okay, this is so weirdly worded.
Compressor outdoor temperature.
Okay, hang on here. Let's just pretend none of that happened and let's just do it again. And I'll actually read the name of the thing before I change it. All right, so this is gonna lock out my auxiliary heat, which in my case is an electric heater. So that one I wanted to put up high. We had this backwards here. I was saying them all backwards. All right, so with this one up high, so let's say like when it's above 45 degrees or whatever I determine, I shouldn't need electric heat and a heat pump. So that locks out my electric heat above 47 in this case. This one, I may choose to put that one at like 20 degrees, knowing that most manufacturers don't run their heat pump below 17. So what that means is below 20 degrees, I'm all electric. Between 20 and 47 in my case, I can run the heat pump and electric together. And above 47, I'm just in the heat pump mode. I think I got it right now. Does that look right to you now, Pete?
Yeah, what's up if you scroll up a little bit more? Is there another setting? No. Yeah, I think that's right then. So auxiliary is talking about, when do you want to avoid running your aux heat? Once it warms up, and your compressor is going to shut down once it gets colder. So yeah, that looks right. It'll ask you the compressor question if you're not running a heat pump too. So that's why I think you said the wording needs to change. So
yeah, I agree. Maybe we'll talk about that later on the next version if we can get the wording to be more obvious to people. All these settings that we had are at the same time, same that we had before. We do have a minimum time on the auxiliary heat, which we didn't have before because we didn't have auxiliary heat, but it works the same way as the heating and cooling ones we talked about before. All the staging stuff works the same way like we talked about before. Because I told it I wanted manual previously, and if I do manual, then I'm gonna have to go in here and tell it that when do I want my auxiliary to kick in. So what that means is when I'm using the compressor heat for heat pump mode and auxiliary at the same time. So in our example, between 20 and 47 degrees outside, how long do I want to wait for the indoor temperature to get cold before I say, okay, let's bring on the auxiliary electric heater as a second stage. So I might want to make that maybe like 3 degrees or something like that. So it tries to take care of it with the heat pump first. If it can't get it done with the heat pump, all right, you can bring on the auxiliary heat. I can do reverse staging with auxiliary heat, just like I did with the gas furnace previously, so that would work the same as well. All right, what other questions does anybody have? I know we're 10 minutes over our time here. Anything else we needed to cover, Pete?
No, that's all I had. Yeah, hopefully that was helpful for everybody. I think the point of this training was to kind of take a deep dive. So if you guys have any technical questions, then I'm happy to hang on for a bit and answer them, or you can always contact me or Ryan, and we'll definitely get you an answer. So I didn't see any questions in the chat box.
Yeah, nothing else is on the question box here. I think we answered all of them. Ferris asked what you're in my emails were. So it's peter.w@ecobee.com, and it's ryan.hoger, H-O-G-E-R, @tecmungo.com, if you guys wanted to send us a question later on or whatever.
Yeah, and if you go to our website and you go to contact us, you can find my information out there as well. You can find all the regional salespeople's info on our site. So
cool. I don't see any more questions. So with that, I'm going to thank Pete again for his time. We did record this, so if you got a coworker or an employee or whatever that needs to watch it, it'll be up on our website, tecmungo.com. Click on training. It'll be up on there in takes about 3 or 4 hours for me to compile the video and get it uploaded, but it'll be up there by the end of the day. Cool. Thanks, Pete. Appreciate it.
all right. Thank you, Ryan. Have a good weekend, everyone.